What is wrong with Gollum? Does he have some kind of mental illness or personality disorder? Was he always like this? Is this the power of the ring over him? And will the ring, if Frodo has it for a long time, inevitably do this to him as well? My dog's drinking. I think this is honestly one of the most fascinating chapters in the entire book so far in relationship to all these questions. And I think that the way that Tolkien deals with this through the lens of Frodo is actually quite genius and telling for what Smeagol is currently going through. One of the most fascinating chapters in the entire book. But in the Taming of Smeagol chapter, there are just so many questions that pop up that I kind of want to talk about in this essay. And this chapter is far, far creepier and more interesting than the movies really portray it. But as always, make sure you like this video and subscribe. I am publishing video essays on my first time read through. And it is an incredible read through from the start. I am so excited to keep reading through this text. I'm also publishing some videos on Harry Potter, Brandon Sanderson, and we'll hit some other great books as the months go by. So make sure you subscribe. I'm also going to hit the whole legendarium of Tolkien. You know, we'll probably get there, finish that in 10 years. Also, you can donate to a specific video if you want, or you can become a member for members only content and early access to videos. It's a little bit of help for the channel that kind of helps it grow and helps me sustain this and be able to do this long term. So a little bit behind the scenes too. I sat down on my computer to write this essay about 3 hours ago. And I've deleted everything I wrote in that time because I kind of felt like I wasn't really getting at what I wanted to get at. And I was kind of dancing around the issue. But after about 3 hours of writing and not being able to find the words for what I wanted to talk about with Smeagol, I think I finally found it to some degree. I still feel like I'm kind of dancing around the issue, but I think I've honed in on it slightly. For a while I was attempting to find a diagnosis for Smeagol, which I will talk about at length in the next few minutes. But the more I think about it, the less I actually think he has a distinct personality disorder, or even a mental problem. Well, actually, he does have some problems, and I think he does have to some degree a mental disability, but I think Smeagol is behaving more like someone who is an addict than someone with a personality disorder, like multiple personality disorder or schizophrenia or something. But still, at the same time, I think what he's kind of dealing with is still in line with a personality disorder to some extent. And this is where I'm very curious. I would love for you guys to respond to this and kind of tell me two things. Tell me what you think he has, even though we're all, amateur psychologists. And then more importantly, I want to know how you would deal with it. If Frodo or Sam's way is good. But it's interesting too, in attempting to find a diagnosis for him, and I do want to make a point too, because I kind of just said this, I think no one but a professional should really be diagnosing people. I'm not going to sit here going through the DSM, kind of looking for what Smeagol has, or for what anybody has, really, for that matter. I think there are far too many amateur psychologists that don't really have the schooling or the ability to understand what's really going on in the mind of a person and all the surrounding circumstances and situations. And I think that the amateur psychologists, like people who kind of just diagnose people off the cuff, have ended up doing more harm to people than good. Okay, getting off my soapbox. But in attempting to find a diagnosis for Smeagol in like some papers that I was writing, I found a paper from the National Library of Medicine. In this article, they go over his behavior and they go over the potential things that were kind of like lacking in his diet or that he lacks from being in the mountains and not getting any sun. It's actually a pretty interesting article, and I'll link it in the description as well. But I want to read the last little bit of this where they do attempt to diagnose him. I think it's just a fascinating little bit of writing here. An internet search found 1,300 sites discussing the nature of Gollum's mental illness. We asked 30 randomly selected medical students if they thought Gollum had a mental illness. Schizophrenia was the most common diagnosis, 25 students, followed by multiple personality disorder, 3. On initial consideration, schizophrenia seems a reasonable diagnosis. However, in the context of the culture at the time, it is unlikely. Delusions are false, unshakable beliefs, not in keeping with the patient's culture. In Middle-earth, the power of the ring is a reality. The passivity phenomena Gollum experiences are caused by the ring. And these symptoms occur in all ring bearers. Gollum does not fulfill the ICD-10 criteria for the diagnosis of schizophrenia. The presence of two personalities, Gollum and Smeagol, raises the possibility of multiple personality disorder. In this diagnosis, one personality is suppressed by the other, and the two personalities are always unaware of each other's existence. In this case, Gollum and Smeagol occur together, have conversations simultaneously, and are aware of each other's existence. Gollum displays pervasive maladaptive behavior that has been present since childhood with a persistent disease course. His odd interest and spiteful behavior have led to difficulty in forming friendships and have caused distress to others. He fulfills 7 of the 9 criteria for schizoid personality disorder, ICD F60.1. And if we must label Gollum's problems, we believe that this is the most likely diagnosis. Now, weirdly, I think that last sentence is really telling, that this article was written almost out of a necessity of people wanting to diagnose Smeagol. But I actually think Gollum's problems are maybe a little bit more in line with that of an addict than someone with a direct personality disorder. Although I think both things are true. I think that he does have a personality disorder, but I also think he's exhibiting maybe a little bit more like an addict. Yes, he was exhibiting a lot of strange behavior before he kind of came in possession of the ring, but I think the ring exacerbated those tendencies in him already, rather than created any kind of new ones. Now, a therapist that I've worked with before actually has a theory, and I'm not going to throw this person under the bus because this probably isn't a very popular theory, but it was interesting when they were talking to me about it. They said that multiple personality disorder isn't really real, and it's more just a trauma response where the person is reverting back to their pre-abuse state because there are usually only 2 personalities and there's not multiple personalities. Now, this could potentially be the answer with Gollum and Smeagol as the paper suggested, but I think it's still lacking. And I think J.R.R. Tolkien had that idea in mind a little bit, but I think more so he had in mind the idea of an addict than someone with a direct personality disorder. But at the same time, I kind of want to talk about this at length at the end of the essay, in the way that Frodo deals with Smeagol. I think it's the perfect start for how you deal with someone either with a personality disorder or an addiction. And it typifies how you need to deal with the situation if you're like someone like, if someone like Gollum pops up in your life out of the rocks. But again, I am an amateur myself, and I have worked with people who have had personality disorders, and I kind of know a bit about it, perhaps more than like the typical person, but that's only because I've talked with therapists and psychologists and counselors on how to deal with situations that I was in with some of those individuals. And while Smeagol's behavior was a little, PTSD for me, it was also drastically different in the response and how well the response worked. And I'll talk about that a little bit at the end, not that much though, because I've tried what Frodo did in that situation and I've been massively unsuccessful in some cases. And to be honest, I've been much more successful in others. So this is kind of what I think, and this is, the conclusion early. I think this should be an issue that comes up. This is before the end of the essay, but if you are working with someone who has, multiple personality disorder, or they're borderline or OCD or erotomania or whatever it might be, I think the way that you deal with that is different for every single disorder and different for every single person. So seek counseling and psychology for answers for some of these questions. Seek someone who is a professional in this area. But with that being said, I think Frodo, what he does at the start is a great start. But first I want to kind of paint this picture and read some of the text so that you have a good understanding of what is actually happening with Smeagol. Now, I think Frodo and Sam and how they respond to him are really, really interesting. I'll talk about that in a bit. But this is our introduction to Smeagol. Down the face of a precipice, sheer and almost smooth it seemed in the pale moonlight, a small black shape was moving, with its thin limbs splayed out. Maybe its soft, clinging hands and toes were finding crevices and holes that no hobbit could have ever seen or used. But it looked as if it was just creeping down on sticky pads, like some large prowling thing of insect kind. and it was coming down head first, as if it was smelling its way. Now and again it lifted its head slowly, turning it right back on the long, skinny neck, and the hobbits caught a glimpse of two small, pale gleaming lights. Its eyes, that blinked at the moon for a moment, and then were quickly lit again. I mean, that is terrifying. But the text goes a little later on, and this is kind of what you have on the next page. The black crawling shape was now 3/4 of the way down, and perhaps 50 feet or less above the cliff's foot. Crouching stone still in the shadow of a large boulder, the hobbits watched him. He seemed to have come down to a difficult passage, or to be troubled about something. They could hear him snuffling, and now and again there was a harsh hiss of breath that sounded like a curse. He lifted his head, and they thought they heard him spit. Then he moved on again. Now they could hear his voice creaking and whistling. Ah, caution, my precious. More haste, less speed. We mustn't risk our necks, must we, precious? No, precious. Gollum. He lifted his head again, blinked at the moon, and quickly shut his eyes. We hate it, he hissed. Nasty, nasty, shivery light it is. It spies on us, precious. It hurts our eyes. He was getting lower now, and the hisses became sharper and clearer. Where is it? Where is it, my precious, my precious? It's ours, it is, and we wants it. The thieves, the filthy little thieves, where are they with my precious? Curse them. We hates them. It doesn't sound as if he knew we were here, does it? Whispered Sam. And what's his precious? Does he mean the shh? Breathed Frodo. He's getting near now. Near enough to hear a whisper. Indeed, Gollum had suddenly paused again, and his large head on its scrawny neck was lolling from side to side, as if he was listening. His pale eyes were half unlidded. Sam restrained himself, though his fingers were twitching. His eyes, filled with anger and disgust, were fixed on the wretched creature as he now began to move again, still whispering and hissing to himself. Again, this is terrifying. Now, this next passage is kind of where I started to attempt to look up information to diagnose Gollum and Smeagol. Actually, should I call him Gollum or Smeagol? I feel like I should keep calling him Smeagol. This is what the book says. Gollum collapsed and went as loose as wet strings. Sam got up, fingering his shoulder, his eyes smoldering with anger, but he could not avenge himself. His miserable enemy lay groveling on the stones, whimpering. Don't hurt us. Don't let them hurt us, precious. They won't hurt us, will they, nice little hobbitses? We didn't mean no harm, but they jumps on us like cats on poor mices, they did, precious. And we're so lonely, Gollum. We'll be nice to them, very nice, if they'll be nice to us, won't we? Yes, yes. When I read that, I saw the instant mood change of Gollum and thought, does he perhaps have borderline personality disorder? Now, I still think that's a possibility, but only because I've dealt with someone who has borderline and I kind of know some of the symptoms of it. And that person kind of manipulated me consciously and changed mood so suddenly and rapidly that it kind of caught me off guard all the time. But I don't know at this point in the story if Gollum is doing this with any sort of manipulation in mind or if he's kind of just naive and innocent. I don't really know. He just seems to have Smeagol and Gollum battling back and forth for who gets dominion. Almost kind of like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of situation. And I thought that little instance was so interesting because he just kind of switches moods immediately. But I want to read this whole next section as well because this is the instance that Frodo starts to treat and deal with Smeagol. And I think it's the most telling bit of information that Gollum is more like an addict than someone with a direct personality disorder. But again, at the same time, and I keep making this like amendment, I don't think anybody can really rule out the idea that this might be a personality disorder too. I went to the best source of information that the world has in ChatGPT. I'm just kidding. I did go to ChatGPT. It's not, the best source of information. But I did ask ChatGPT if they thought Gollum was more behaving like an addict or someone with a personality disorder. And being very diplomatic, ChatGPT said both. They said the summary was Gollum or Smeagol from The Lord of the Rings exhibits a complex blend of psychological traits that can be interpreted as both addiction and symptoms of a personality disorder. But this is what the text says with my commentary in between, because I think this section is so fascinating for how Gollum behaves and how Sam behaves and how Frodo behaves. Well, what's to be done with it, said Sam. Tie it up, so as it can't come sneaking after us no more, I say. But that would kill us, whimpered Gollum. Cruel little hobbitses. Tie us up in the cold, hard lands and leave us. Gollum, Gollum. Sobs welled up in his gobbling throat. No, said Frodo. If we kill him, we mustn't kill him outright. But we can't do that. Not as things are. Poor wretch. He has done us no harm. Oh, hasn't he? Said Sam, rubbing his shoulder. Anyway, he meant to. And he means to. I'll warrant. Throttle us in our sleep. That's his plan, I dare say, said Frodo. But what he means to do is another matter. He paused for a while in thought. Gollum lay still, but stopped whimpering. Sam stood glowering over him. Now, first notice the differences in how Frodo and Sam want to deal with Smeagol. Sam doesn't trust him at all. He knows the whole operation is in jeopardy if they bring him along, or if they don't kill him. And his response is incredibly harsh. Now, later it actually does say that Sam is gentler than his words, which I kind of love, but Frodo is the one who is trying to give Smeagol a chance. And honestly, this is dangerous. For people with a personality disorder, change is possible, I believe, against the beliefs of one psychologist I talked to about this. But I think it's immensely difficult. I think with neuroplasticity, I think it is possible. And it is impossible if the person doesn't really want to change in the first place. I think Sam's advice here is out of self-protection. And it's a necessary bit of advice too. If you are in a situation where someone is abusing or using you, just walking away totally and completely taking steps to make sure that person never follows you. Now, legally do that, not in the ultimate sense that Sam is suggesting here. I think that is actually one of the best ways that you can deal with things, doing it in a legal way. Restraining and protection orders are there for a reason. Totally taking away the threat via a protection order works. But Frodo is compelled by something else. And this is what the text says. It seemed to Frodo then that he heard quite plainly but far off voices out of the past. What a pity Bilbo did not stab the vile creature when he had the chance. Pity. It was pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy. Not to strike without need. I do not feel any pity for Gollum. He deserves death. Deserves death? I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give that to them? Then be not too eager to deal out death in the name of justice, fearing for your own safety. Even the wise cannot see all ends. Very well, he answered, aloud, lowering his sword. But still, I am afraid. And yet, as you see, I will not touch the creature. For now that I see him, I do pity him. No, Frodo is afraid here, but still pities him. I think it's a beautiful thing for Frodo to do, but it's also dangerous. I know there are a lot of you out there who have dealt with a situation like this before, where you've offered someone grace, or maybe a second chance, or a third chance, or maybe 100th chance, and they've just kept stepping over you and falling back to their usual behavior. I think pity and mercy are beautiful things, and that everyone should have a second chance. I fully believe that. I think everyone deserves a second chance. But there's also practical wisdom and protection to consider too. If that person is affecting your life in negative ways, learn how to create healthy distance. And learning how to do that might be the best step to take. And I love that Sam is having this debate with Frodo here. Yet, and I think this is the most important thing, pity for Tolkien does not mean letting Smeagol do whatever he wants. And this is where I think the response of Frodo is nothing short of miraculous here. And it makes me think that Tolkien knew a thing or two about the mind and psychology. The book goes on. Sam stared at his master, who seemed to be speaking to someone who was not there. Gollum lifted his head. "Yes, wretched we are, precious," he whined. "Misery, misery. Hobbits won't kill us, nice hobbits." "No, we won't," said Frodo. "But we won't let you go either. You're full of wickedness and mischief, Gollum. You will have to come with us, that's all, while we keep an eye on you. But you must help us, if you can. One good turn deserves another." "Yes, yes indeed," said Gollum, sitting up. "Nice hobbits. We will come with them. Find them safe paths in the dark. Yes, we will. And where are they going in these cold, hard lands, we wonders? Yes, we wonders." He looked up at them, and a faint light of cunning and eagerness flickered for a second in his pale, blinking eyes. Sam scowled at him and sucked his teeth, but he seemed to sense that there was something odd about his master's mood, and that the matter was beyond argument. All the same, he was amazed at Frodo's reply. Frodo is firm here, and I desperately want to read the last 3 pages of this chapter just to show how firm he is and how good he is in this entire instance, but every sentence that Frodo speaks is full of it. He is unmoving in his opinion. Yes, he shows mercy, but at the same junction, he does not waver from his requirements of Smeagol. And Sam is standing there amazed at the response because I think up to this point, Frodo has been wavering at every point. Look at him previously in the books, especially in the Breaking of the Fellowship chapter. He is so unsure of what he's doing, and he doesn't really have any grasp on the situation. He has conviction, yes, but he is scared and terrified. That has kept him from being bold and firm. But in this moment, I think Frodo becomes a real leader. It felt like the Harry moment with the Elder Wand versus the Deathly Hallows. It's his firmness with treating Smeagol that helps to put Smeagol in place and helps this journey be the first step on his rehabilitation. But at the same time, I think a lot of us think mercy needs to be paired with allowance. But I think it's anything but. In our mercy, I think we offer people a second chance, but with a keen eye on them. We do it firmly, fully acknowledging that they know the consequences should they fail. And while I am a person who believes in 3rd and 4th chances because he who is without sin cast the first stone, I also don't believe that we should continually let people into our lives who are hurting and harming us. Sometimes, I think the best thing to do is to set up boundaries, to put walls in our life where we might need. Because people who know the boundaries of things can kind of operate in a healthier way most of the time. I keep thinking of the Mending Wall poem by Robert Frost here. And it has the 2 famous lines in this poem. One is, "Something there is that doesn't love a wall." And then toward the end of this poem, there's a line that says, "Good fences make good neighbors." 2 great lines about 2 neighbors who believe 2 different things about walls. But in our life, boundaries are immensely helpful. And if someone has trespassed on boundaries that the person knows about, I think it's all right to be firm with that person. But for Smeagol here, I think he's acting like an addict. He's looking for his next fix. And I think what Frodo does is astonishing in offering mercy and then essentially waving the ring in front of his face. That section blew my mind. Frodo is looking to get Smeagol's word, and they want to swear on something. Now, this is what the text says. "No, not on it," said Frodo, looking down at him with a stern pity. "All you wish is to see it and touch it, if you can, though you know it would drive you mad. Not on it, swear by it, if you will. For you know where it is. Yes, you know, Smeagol. It is before you. For a moment, it appeared to Sam that his master had grown, and Gollum had shrunk. A tall, stern shadow. A mighty lord who hid his brightness in gray cloud. And at his feet, a little whining dog. Yet the two were in some way akin and not alien. They could reach one another's minds. Gollum raised himself and began pawing at Frodo, fawning at his knees. How good of writing is that? It blows my mind. Before, only Aragorn and Gandalf had this description, and perhaps Galadriel too. I think Galadriel had something like that. But now Frodo has this and how he deals with Smeagol. And it was so fascinating. And I think it's bizarre that he's essentially putting the ring in front of Smeagol here, but at the same point, he's making sure that he doesn't attempt to gain the ring. It was a really bizarre section. I want to hear what you guys think about that in the comments. He's offering what might be maybe his best chance for Smeagol to have a healthy rehabilitation, maybe, in that the temptation is kind of always in front of him. And he is offering Smeagol a chance to master this temptation while it's directly in front of him. I just don't know how beneficial that will be, to be completely honest, but all this to say that I am marveling in this chapter about Frodo's response to Gollum. It is incredible. And something I kind of think I need to think about a lot more. I think this first chapter is going to propel me to think about this in every single following chapter that we get with Smeagol and Sam and Frodo. I think I'm going to keep going back to this one for the rest of my read. And I am, again, very curious what you guys think about Smeagol and what you think about his issues. Do you think he's more like an addict? Do you think he has a personality disorder? Let me know in the comments. Make sure you like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.